There is no beast worse than man. Unfortunately, this proverb has been proven true on many occasions. Dive in and let us know, is there any beast worse than men? The saying accurately describes a group of people who shoot defenseless animals to extinction, sometimes solely for money. This group ruthlessly hunts beautiful and rare animals to sell their skins off to luxurious brands and fur dealers. The story happened to a huntsman from Russia named Eugene, who claimed to have met an Amur tiger face to face in the forests he was born and raised in. As a boy, Eugene heard incredible stories from his parents and grandparents about fascinating encounters with tigers. However, as you may guess, these stories were nothing other than mere fairy tales and myths for kids. Eugene grew up knowing that tigers lived in those forests he lived in, but he never got the chance to see one of those magnificent creatures he's heard so much about in person. When Eugene got older, he married a lovely young woman, Maria, and got a job as a gatekeeper to provide for his family and keep a roof above their heads. The couple had a daughter whom they loved dearly a few months after they got married. When Maria became a young woman, she got married and moved out of the city. Her parents stayed in their old house in the forest, living their elder days together in peace and quiet, until Eugene's wife got extremely sick and her disease slowly dimmed her light until she passed away, never knowing that she was soon going to be a grandmother. Eugene was very affected by the death of his beloved wife and partner, but he soon realized that he had to carry on and mend the broken parts of his heart for the sake of his grandson Ivan. Eugene was unable to see his daughter and grandson as often as he'd like to, as he was unable to leave his farm to visit them, and his daughter was unable to travel a long distance to visit him because of her job. They only saw each other every couple of years, and Eugene always looked forward to these visits. He'd plan out picnics with his grandson and would cook great meals to welcome them. When Ivan was 12 years old, he was very curious about everything his grandfather did. He especially loved the stories his grandfather told him every night before bed. One evening, the boy asked his grandfather if he had ever seen a tiger around, and Eugene told him that he hadn't, unfortunately. However, at the boy's apparent disappointment, Eugene clarified that he had actually met a tigress. Ivan settled in to listen to his grandfather's story about meeting the emerged tigress. It was 20 years ago, when Eugene and his wife had chickens, skis, stuck pigs, and cows. They had no time to be bored at all, and their hands were quite busy. All day long, Eugene would take care of the small animal farm while his wife, Maria, would attend to gardening and house chores. The winter was coming to an end. The snow had already melted and buds started showing up on the trees that were shedding their white winter cloaks. Nature was finally waking up from hibernation. The ground was dry enough in some places, which meant Eugene was finally able to plant potatoes. After he had been digging for some time, he took a short break to catch his breath and stretch his muscles a little. It was then that Eugene noticed some movement in the bushes. When he looked in the direction the cracking sound came from, it looked like some sort of striped animal. However, he thought to himself that he was just imagining things, as there were no striped animals whatsoever in the vicinity. Eugene just went back to his work, but then the bushes began to stir again, and Eugene felt eyes on him. Chill ran down his spine and his heart started racing. Eugene got his force together and turned his head to see a huge tiger only a few steps away. As an experienced hunter, Eugene realized that he would not have time to escape from it even if he wanted to, as it could catch him in the matter of 3 seconds. He just stood frozen in fear, not knowing what to do next, until he noticed that the tigress was actually wounded. But the tigress turned and disappeared into the bushes. Only a few moments after, the tigress reappeared with a cub in its mouth. The tigress took a step towards Eugene and laid the tiger cub on the grass, pushing it in Eugene's direction. The tigress pushed its cub and then disappeared into the forest. Eugene stood there for several minutes, afraid to move, as he did not know if the tigress had gone or was hiding in the bushes looking at him. One thing was for sure, though: the tigress wanted him to take care of him since it was injured and could not take care of the cub on its own. After a while, Eugene went up to the small striped cub and looked at it. It was so little, only about a month old, and clearly did not yet know how to feed on its own. The cub was lying on the grass and desperately calling to its mother to come back. That's the moment where Eugene realized that the tigress was not coming back. Eugene picked the cub up and carried it home with him. His wife was surprised to see him get such a creature to their house. They sat together and looked at it, not knowing what to do. After the couple had a small discussion, they decided that they should feed it until he was ready to go back into its native forest. They fed the little cub with a bottle for the first month, and then it graduated to eating raw meat during the second month. Fortunately, Eugene was a skilled hunter, so they always had fresh meat in the house to feed their cub with. The tiger grew very quickly, but it acted just like a domestic cat. The cub got along well with all of the other animals and did not show any sign of aggression. 9 months passed. During this time, the cub grew to be 115 pounds. It was getting harder and harder to keep it hidden from people, and the couple was worried that word would get out about the tiger, which would attract a lot of trouble and other not so thoughtful hunters. The fur of its kind was very valuable on the market, and its presence at their house needed to remain a secret for the sake of its own safety. Even though the couple grew very attached to the tiger, considering that they have raised it since it was a little cub, they were fully aware that they had to release it back into the forest for its own safety. When the day came and Eugene let the now-grown tiger into the forest, it seemed to understand what was happening. Eugene was worried that it would just follow him back home, but instinct took over it and the tiger just disappeared into the thicket of the forest, after it had one last look at the one who saved it and raised it until it was big enough to stand on its own. As for the cub's mother that left it almost a year back, word spread that some poachers were hunting Amur tigers in the forest, and that they actually managed to shoot a tigress with its 2 cubs. The hunters caught one cub, but the mother grabbed the other one in time and ran away with it. As you can presume, it was this cub that was brought to Eugene to take care of, since the mother was no longer able to due to its wounds and the hunters preying on it. The poachers said that a furious tigress attacked their camp that night, destroying everything in revenge for the cub they mercilessly took away from it. Nobody ever saw the tigress again, and until this day, it is not known whether it was able to escape and survive, or if it died in the forest by the severity of its wounds it had. Fortunately, the poachers were arrested and got what they deserved to the full extent of law regulating hunt of rare animals.